Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, November 21st, and this is the meeting of the Comox Valley Regional District Board. Welcome to those of you in attendance and also online. My name is Jonathan Kerr, and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting as the chair of Regional District is out of town and attending by Zoom, Director Cole Hamilton. So first thing that we always do in these meetings is recognition of the traditional territories. And we're going to read one of the following calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada calls to action report. And call to action number 36 is justice, which is very fitting given our first delegation this evening. So we, as the CVRD board, call upon the federal, provincial, and territorial governments to work with Aboriginal communities to provide culturally relevant services to inmates on issues such as substance abuse, family, and domestic violence, and overcoming the experience of having been sexually abused. So again, thanks to the staff for preparing this and allowing us to do this at each meeting. Any last minute additions or changes to the agenda? Director Hillian.
Chair, I think you may have neglected to actually do the territorial acknowledgement along with the call to action being read.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, so we, of course, are on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nations. And thank you, Director Hillian, for mentioning that. Appreciate it. So, so no changes to the agenda. The one thing I would like to just say and welcome and congratulate James Warren on being named the CAO for the CVRD. So congratulations on behalf of the board. We look forward to working with you over the coming year and beyond. Thank you. Yes. All right. So item C is adoption of the minutes. And we have some minutes dated November 7th, moved by Director Grieve, seconded by Director Hillian. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's approved. D, there's no business arising from the minutes. So now we're on to Section E, petitions and delegations. And we have two delegations tonight. The first is from the Community Justice Center. I'd like to welcome Karen McKinnon, Managing Director of the Comox Valley Community Justice, to present information regarding the activities this evening. So Karen, you're welcome to come up and join us at the mic. So we'll have a presentation first, followed by a discussion, and then a chance to ask questions of our speaker and of staff. And I will turn your mic on shortly. Karen, if you just hit the button on top of the mic, and then I can turn it on for you. There you go.
Fantastic. So I want to start first by saying thank you to the CVRD for your funding, and beyond that, for your partnership and support of restorative justice in the community, and the work you do to promote a safe, inclusive, peaceful Comox Valley that you do individually and collectively. I'd also like to say thank you to some of our volunteers and all our volunteers. We have volunteers and board members in the room today. In our organization, we have 60 volunteers. The CJC has 2 employees, both myself, I'm employed 20 hours a week, and Anne, our office manager, who's employed 12 hours a week. The CJC is needing to increase its capacity to meet the increased demands from the community. And we're here today to ask for an increase in funding to address rising operational costs and the need for additional staff hours. We do apply for grants and are often successful. Many have to be project specific and cannot be used for day-to-day delivery of core services. We are also actively involved in advocacy for increased provincial and federal funding that can be used to deliver core services. So the Comox Valley Restorative Justice Center programs, I've broken them into 3 different slides here. The CJC uses restorative justice principles and practices to support peacemaking and the resolution of conflicts for the community. It's achieved through resolution conferences, dialogue, and education. Community education is typically grant dependent or run as a cost recovery program. In Q1 of this fiscal year, which isn't over yet, it ends December 31st, we have had as many files as we did in all of last year. Files are also trending towards having more individuals, both the affected parties and the responsible parties, often known by some as victim and offenders, involved in the cases. The files are also more complex, as we see more financial and mental health challenges represented in the people we work with. This requires more management oversight, both in supporting volunteers and managing files myself, sometimes due to the sensitive nature of the files or due to volunteer time. This increased complexity also calls on us to provide more volunteer training to ensure our volunteers maintain strong skills in victim-centered and culturally informed service delivery, neurodivergency, equity, and more. We can lean on many of our community partners to deliver this education, but organizing takes time and there are expenses involved. We also need to closely monitor our relationships that those who refer to us, both for the criminal and non-criminal files. Our referring agencies are experiencing higher staff turnover, staff shortages, increased complexities, and we need to build and maintain those relationships to ensure the systems we have working together are efficient, or else we know that there can be a tendency to revert to past old standards of managing conflict in a punitive way for situations that would benefit from restorative justice. I'm just going to read a recent impact statement that was shared with us. I was 13. I was impulsive. I was very self-absorbed and very greedy. I would shoplift from businesses with no remorse because I didn't think it affected anyone, nor did I care. I kept getting away with it, except one day I got caught. It was humiliating. Luckily, I was able to go to restorative justice and learn lessons. I had to do community service hours at the food bank, and it was honestly life-changing. I saw how people lived in poverty, and I realized I was so lucky to have the life that I had. I had another chance, and I'm forever grateful that I'm able to have this future I'm having. It changed everything. We hear that often, regularly. In this case, this child was facing poor mental health, which we know many of our youth are experiencing at a very high rate. And in this situation, this child was suicidal. Being brought into the Restorative Justice Center did a few things for her and her family. It helped them understand how her mental health was playing out in her community. It helped them also move her to a place where she would accept counseling. But what it also did is it brought her in, and it showed her that she was valuable, that she could have some agency actually, and that she had things to add to the community. And also the volunteering then taught her that. It was a turnaround point for her and her family. And she's 17 and doing well. And I know the real impact of this because her parent is one of our valued volunteers. So while this is an example with the youth, we work with people of all ages and demographics. And due to time, I'm not going to tell you too many impact stories, but if you would like to hear how else we're reducing harm in our community with our resolution conferences, please ask me during the question period. According to research, for offenders, restorative justice has high rates of agreement completion, offers opportunity for healthy reintegration and transformation, and reduces recidivism. For victims, there's a high level of victim satisfaction, increased confidence in the justice system, and victims are left feeling safer and more connected to the community. For the community, the victim, and the offender, it creates a sense of hopefulness and the ability to move forward. It cultivates empathy and understanding, changes perception and stereotypes, increases feelings of safety, and decreases polarization. RJ also assists communities in developing and affirming their values, helping citizens understand accountability for conduct, mobilizing resources to prevent criminal conduct, and healing the divisions caused by conflict and criminal conduct. RJ can also impact systemic change. We have a 90% success rate for closing files as successful. As many of you know, in 2009, 120 local agencies, including all levels of local government, signed the Critical Incident Protocol, which is a commitment to engage in education and response to discrimination, to racist, homophobic, transphobic, or other hate-based incidents. The CJC manages discrimination response according to priority needs and capacity. This response is provided through a restorative justice lens. Recently, as an example, an organization had a practice in play that was experienced in a very homophobic way. The victims asked us to bring the issue to light to the organization as they weren't able to do so themselves. Through the thoughtful approaches of the CJC, the result includes the organization hearing how their practices caused harm, As reparations, the organization then reviewed their values and procedures, attended Pride, and they will be having the group they harmed come speak to the community that they serve and will be providing honorariums as is appropriate for that work. The demand of this work has also increased. When I started my role, I think it's 8 months ago now, and actually even before I started it, the community was reaching out to me and contacting me and telling me we need to amplify this work as there is community need. I'll share that we recently consulted with numerous organizations, including 11 racialized and systemically excluded groups, to ensure that the CJC was the organization to continue coordinating response. And the answer was yes. Oh, I missed that slide. So there's just some of the ways that we respond. Thank you, Lisa. In addition to resolution conferences and critical incidents, the CJC supports peacemaking through facilitation and consultation. We all are aware of the pressures that small businesses face and the complexity regarding the concerns of the unhoused and the toxic drug supply. Earlier this year, due to the CJC approach and scale, we were tapped on the shoulder by our community to help plan and facilitate a sensitive safety and security meeting between the business community and community leaders. Through that process, we also liaised with other affected parties, including the Homeless Coalition, to consider their role and needs so that additional harm was not done. This event strengthened community partnership and actionable steps were put in place. Similarly, we were trusted to help launch and facilitate the situation table, which brings together frontline workers bi-weekly to triage cases of people in escalating or immediate harm to themselves and others. These asks are illustrations of the respect of the CJ has in the community and their ability to facilitate difficult conversations, both when dealing with short and long-term resolutions. And these asks are also getting more numerous. We work in partnership with many organizations in service to them to bridge relationships and to work collectively when we can to leverage services. The example I want to highlight is our work we are beginning with emergency management to support disaster support and recovery, because research shows when there's elevated risk, we have more conflict, discrimination, and injustices, covert and overt. Also, we're working with KFN safety and security programs. We're going to be working together to support their restorative and Indigenous justice procedures and programs to leverage each other's services and not to overlap. This is part of reconciliation work for our community. In closing, I'd like to say it's with humility and knowledge that there are many financial pressures on the CVRD funding. And it's with that knowledge that we ask for an increase in our funding, because the needs of our community are eclipsing our capacity. You can see here on this slide some of the strategic drivers the CVRD and the municipalities have that we are delivering on. We know that new response processes to conflict are a priority for many organizations and individuals in our community, and that we have the history and the skill in our organization to be able to deliver that support. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Karen. Any questions? Okay. Director Hillian.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just want to thank you for coming here today, Karen, and I want to acknowledge that both Director Grieve and myself represent our particular organizations on the CJC board, along with Councillor Blacklock, who it's good to see here today. And I really appreciate that in the 8 months that you've been in the role, that you've come up to speed to the point that here you are at the CVRD for the first time. And although I appreciate that you're asking for additional dollars, you're also essentially giving us a report on the work being done, which is really good to hear. And I want to acknowledge that your predecessor, Mr. Bruce Curtis, is here with you today, along with Anne, and it's really good to see them here. I don't have any questions. I just want to acknowledge that I really appreciate your presentation and the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hillian. And I saw Director Brown's hand up online. Did you still want to ask a question?
Yeah, Doug sort of said it, but yeah, just loads of appreciation for CJC and the work they do in the community, and maybe just I don't know if you spoke to it in the beginning. I'm sorry I arrived late, but how municipalities can get more involved and how people can get more involved.
Oh, Karen, you just turned off your mic. You just hit it again and I'll let you in. Perfect.
Okay, we got it. Okay. Thank you for your kind comments and for your question. As to your question about how municipalities and individuals can get more involved in the CJC, I think that's a twofold question. So individuals, I mean, we are volunteer powered and we have individuals, some of who are here, who are involved in lots of different levels of volunteering. In actually running our panels. And we also will be building out a racialized advisory group, which might not be a fit for some of us, but maybe others with honorariums. So that's a place that the community will be able to get involved in. It's a project we have some funding for. As well, really amplifying and letting our community know that we're here to support the conflicts. That is a huge, important role to play because many people have not heard of restorative justice. And while myself and our volunteers and board members are out there doing it, having other people just saying, maybe this is something CJC can help with. It's fantastic. And I always tell people if they're not sure, you just pick up the phone and call us. As well, if you're just interested in knowing more about restorative justice, we meet with numerous local organizations to talk about how they can bring those principles into their organizations.
Director Grant.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, I didn't notice in here, or maybe I didn't hear, what kind of increase are you looking for?
Yeah, so I'm looking for in year 1 a 13% increase, year 2 a 15%, year 3 10%, year 4 9%, and year 5 9%. And those will help us scale staffing hours and meet expenses. I think there was a time where we thought expenses went up 5% every year. And that is very much not the case. As an example, our insurance just went up 17% for next year.
Great, thank you. So I don't see any other questions. So, sorry, there is someone online. There's Director Arbor. Sorry for missing that. Go ahead, Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. And I just want to mention, I'm listening carefully because of serendipity. Chair Cole Hamilton and I are in Ottawa this weekend, Advocacy Days, and I just found out today that myself and a couple of councillors from Vancouver and the Mayor of Yellowknife are meeting the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. And then I come to the meeting today, and so I'm taking copious notes on your presentation and the upcoming one, the substance use strategy. I really want to honor the incredible work by the nonprofits, but I'll probably steal a lot of your comments and recommendations as in both presentations for the meetings tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So before we leave this conferring with staff, I'd like to entertain if someone would forward a motion to refer this item to staff to be addressed as part of the budget process.
So moved. Cole Hamilton.
There was no receipt motion, so we can go with it. So moved by Director McCollum, and someone online said that.
Was yes. Cole Hamilton trying to move that.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. So thank you very much, Karen. We'll be dealing with this in due time when we go through the fund budget process.
And thank you to you and the incredible staff at the CVRD who's helped me get up to speed in my new role as well. So thank you.
Great. Thanks. Thanks for all the work that you and your organization does. Okay. Next, I'd like to invite up the Comox Valley Substance Use Strategy members, including Carrie Hackett, Sharon Karsten, who's with Walk With Me, and I believe Christopher is as well. Oh, and Betty Tate's online as well. So sorry, combination. And is Carrie online as well?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. There you are. Okay, thank you. We're playing Brady Bunch Zoom squares here online. So that's great. Thank you. So Carrie, I'll turn it over to you. And again, you have 10 minutes and then we'll have a discussion and questions afterwards.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting us tonight, board members and staff and participants. We are reporting tonight on the phase 2 final report, and we're now into phase 3. And we are also acknowledging that the work we do is on the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, and we appreciate them of their stewardship of the land and the waterways. Now, to get into what the substance use strategy has been doing, our approach has been ongoing in-depth examination of power imbalances to uncover systemic biases and create culturally safe spaces, and continued research, consultation, and attention to the root causes that contribute to substance use, like poverty, lack of housing, history of trauma, stigma, discrimination, classism, racism, gender and sexual diversity discrimination, and colonization. Our approach has been active involvement, including decision-making of peers, First Nations elders, and traditional knowledge keepers, and ongoing active involvement of local governments and community organizations. And just to be clear, we want to define what substances, when we say substances, what we mean. And that refers to all mood-altering substances such as, but not limited to, alcohol, tobacco, vaping, nicotine, cannabis, illicit drugs, prescription drugs, medicinal substances, inhalants, and solvents. And that was found in our report. And also, when we refer to the Comox Valley Substance Use Network, it refers to the network of organizations and projects and initiatives working to support people who use substances in the Comox Valley. This definition includes organizations whose work is rooted in harm reduction, recovery, health, mental health services, as well as the upstream areas that have impact on the substance use ecology, including housing, policing, education, and others. And we just want to touch on the Walking Together report that was done concurrently sort of with ours. And we partnered with them on their report. And what they did was a gaps and strengths analysis. They held 16 conversations, 8 with people with lived and living experience, and 8 with service providers. 50 peers attended the conversations, 51 surveys were completed. Purpose was to map peers' experience with the system and identify service strengths and gaps. Service providers also attended. 21 service providers from 10 organizations provided research information. And the purpose was for service providers to suggest ways to improve collaboration and each other to identify and address gaps. And conversations were informed by the data provided through peer conversations. So with that, I will turn now over to Betty, who will speak more to the actual recommendations.
Hello, everyone. Sorry. It's great to be here tonight. Thank you for having us. So I have the extreme pleasure of introducing the 21 recommendations in the report. 11 of them are from the Walk With Me research, so the gaps and strengths analysis, and 10 are from the work that the Substance Use Committee did over the past 2 years, actually, in phase 1 and phase 2. So first of all, I'm not going to talk about every single recommendation. I'm going to do them just by the slides. I think you can read them, and then that'll leave maybe more time for questions. So these first 6 slides are 6 recommendations are all related to both harm reduction and treatment service improvements. And these are really on the ground things that we heard loud and clear, both from peers and service providers when Walk With Me did their conversations. And so you can see what they are there. I'm not going to read them, as I said. I'll give you a minute, and then we can move on to the next one, Carrie. And these ones, these next 5 are really related to creating that better substance use service network, the definition that Carrie gave. So there's systemic and context recommendations. So we heard a lot about improving relationships and that the system is siloed and it's very difficult to navigate. That transportation to getting to service is an issue. Just basically, it's hard to navigate this system, and there's a lot that we can do in this set of recommendations to improve that. And I should say here too that it was difficult to navigate, but also there's many barriers to accessing the service, and particularly related to stigma and culturally unsafe services, and particularly for systemically excluded people. So we heard also that. So those are also big sort of network system changes. I have to say that this report is not tinkering around the edges. It's quite ambitious. But if we're going to make change, that's what we need. Okay, next slide. These next 10 or 10 recommendations are from the substance use strategy. And this is from the work we did in the community, both in phase 1 and phase 2. So these 5 are still the context of our system, and some more upstream recommendations, some work with youth, some work with seniors that's badly needed, and the formation of the collaborative you'll see there that I'll talk a little bit about later. And the next slide, please. And the last 5 here are, they also speak to the context and how important it is to engage people that may not have been engaged in this work in the past. It's sort of been service providers, peers. Peers are very important to having engaged in all of this work, but also businesses, municipal policy development, advocacy, and also what we heard over and over and over again was that you can't get healthy if you don't have a house. If you're unhoused, it's impossible to look after your health. So the whole non-market affordable housing is crucial to this work. And I just want to say too that many of these recommendations are already being worked on. It's kind of as we were doing the report, the community was moving forward, which is really great. So you'll recognize there, just as an example, the non-market affordable housing. I believe the regional district's talking about a housing authority. We've got funding in our community for the PACT. There's been some work done on some of the earlier recommendations around the OPS in our community. So we're not starting from zero, but we've got a fair amount of work to do still. So, and the next slide, please. I'm almost finished. So I mentioned that our current actions, the collaborative has been formed and will be the driver of actioning the recommendations. The health network has been facilitating this work, and our contract with the city of Courtenay will be up at the end of phase 3. So this work needs to be moved to a more permanent home. And we're working on doing that because we also know that the work's going to be going on for several years in our community. And we're in the process of grouping recommendations. We had a great meeting today, actually, with our working group, and grouping these recommendations and developing action teams to implement them. And so our ask from you is basically to participate with us and support the recommendations, participate in the collaborative or any relevant action tables. And I just want to put a bit of a pitch in for the Walk With Me report, and actually all of the comments from participants that are in that report. They're 2 big long reports. And if you don't have a chance to read anything else, just thumb through those comments about what people in our community are saying about what needs to be done. And next slide. Finally, I just want to say thanks to the funders. You can see who funded this, including the Comox Valley Regional District, and we're very appreciative of your actually 2 years of funding support to do this work. So thank you very much. And with that, I think Carrie and I are happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Betty, for that presentation. Any questions, comments? Okay, perfect. We have Director Arbor online. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. And I'm just struggling. I would love to find, maybe through staff or whatever, the Walk With Me reports you just alluded to. My question was in recommendation 19, obviously, which is it talks about easily accessible safe supply, and to advocate for that. So of course we know about the pilot in BC. So can you be behind that recommendation? Can you provide a little bit more context around how things are going from the perspective of people on the committee around how the pilot is rolling out and how it's whether we're seeing positive or negative impacts so far in the Comox Valley?
I can't actually say that it's been assessed. It would all be anecdotal, but what I can say is that it's a good first start. It's not what and it was the community action team in our community that all of the other organizations got around it, but did some really big advocacy with our MP, Gord Johns, and really what that was asking for from the federal government got reduced a fair bit to become the pilot in BC. And certainly I would say what most people are feeling, or in the service community, is that it works. It may work to reduce some stigma. It isn't really working to reduce the deaths that we've been seeing, because the amount of substances that people can get through safer supply is not enough to sustain them when they're in their addiction. So but what it is doing, I mean, there have been other things that safer supply is definitely, there's more than there used to be. There's people testing their own drugs. We've got testing strips. There's certainly movement towards doing better, but there's still further to go.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that added context and background.
Yes, and just a note, Director Arbor, I believe it's been called not the Walk With Me report, but the Walking Together report, and it's listed just under item 2 of the agenda for anyone else that's following along, wants to take a look. And over to Director Brown online.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's come to present. And I've been working with the substance use group for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years now, since the beginning, and really have learned so very much through that work, and along with other electeds, have been spreading the word about what we're doing here. I just want to say how important this work is, and how well it's being managed in a good way, with peers, with safety, with all, just the way they're working is really quite remarkable.
Thank you for those comments. Over to Director Morin.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair. Thanks so much for the report. Really great work over the past few years on now going into phase 3, which is exciting. I know that I've spoken to you folks many times about the stigma piece, which is always my my squeaky wheel. And I just wondered if there was a particular working group on that topic. It's huge in itself on how we effectively break down stigma on any given day. I'll see comments, particularly on social media, but even out at public events or whatever, that are just completely inaccurate around addiction, around what's available to people. There's still a myth that, people can just get help when they want it, which, as we all know, is completely not the case. And lots of myths around safe supply, what it is exactly, how available it is, this idea that anybody can get it. It's just, there's so many myths, and it's like, where do you start? So I guess I'm just curious on that particular recommendation, if there's anything more that you can tell me about that. And I would hope that there would be a role for local governments to play in that with our public messaging, because it's in line with many of our strategic priorities. Thanks.
Do you want me to take that one, Carrie?
Sure.
Yep. Okay. Well, actually, at the meeting today, this was one of the big topics of discussion. And what we decided today was to actually put that recommendation under the overview of the collaborative itself, because it really affects all of the other recommendations. So when we divide off into some action working groups to do some work and develop plans for these, they're more specific than that, and stigma affects all of it. So it's going to be part of the collaborative work. And I would say just what you said, Councillor Moran, that we need to create a plan and we need to roll it out to municipalities, businesses. We almost put it actually in with the recommendation around engaging the businesses, because that really needs to happen. But we eventually decided it's going to be coming under the collaborative, and we will be working on it. Does that answer the question?
You want to just hit your mic again? I'll turn you back on. Sorry about that, Dr. Moore.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy to hear that. I think, just even having those myth busters out there, and to me, it's almost like having a bystander approach. How we've done training over the years, or have had information about how you respond to racist or homophobic comments. I think our community folks could use some training on how to respond to the myths around substance use. Thanks.
Yeah.
Great discussion. Director Grieve.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you, Betty, because all the years I've known you, you're unflaggable. You keep moving ahead. My question is, in these days of flagging volunteerism, who's going to be there to replace the people that are doing what you're doing? Because, you reach a point when there is a burnout issue. And do you see younger people coming up and rolling up their sleeves and getting involved? Because my experience has been quite the opposite. So, just a question.
Oh, that's a hard one. I think there's some truth in that. Although I have to say, I'm also involved with social planning, and we had 3 new younger board members join us this year. So I was kind of full of hope about that. And we're also seeing some young people coming to our accessibility committee, our regional accessibility committee. So there's some hope there. But I'd also like to say that within the context of the substance use services and work, and this was also a discussion we had today, there's a real need for supporting one another and doing some resiliency work. And it's kind of the same with volunteering, I guess. Resilience and support. This is really, really, really hard work. And it's very hard work, whether, you're like Karen was talking about, working with a 13-year-old who's acting out shoplifting, but really has a mental health and is suicidal, and they're getting missed. And you discover that, or whether you're working on the streets. I mean, it's all across. We know there's people who are at home using a lot of alcohol and we're not seeing them. And so all the people working with them, there's a real need for all of us to, be supportive and help people be resilient. I think that's true of our world today.
I just wanted to add that our hope is that an organization will step forward to steward this work ongoing.
Great. Any other questions in the room or online? Okay, seeing none, could I have a motion to receive this delegation? Hillian, seconded by Grant. All those in favor? Okay, accepted. And Carrie and Betty, thank you once again for your presentation tonight and all the work that you do in the community.
Thank you very much.
Move electoral area committee minutes from November 6th.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Director Grieve, seconded by Director Hillian to move the next item. It's a report, Electoral Area Services Committee report minutes, from November 6th. Any questions or discussion about these minutes? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Recommendation 1.
Okay, we have a recommendation that a listed number of items from the Community Works Fund be decommitted as listed below. And I believe this means that they go back into the Community Works Fund for reallocation. Any discussion about this? Oh, and Director Grieve.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, just to thank staff for being able to find these efficiencies and recommit. We look forward to recommitting them to some other projects that are underway or stand to start being underway in the electoral areas. So.
Yes, thanks for that. Thank you to staff. Well said. And efficiencies are always good in these times. Okay, so any other comments? I don't see anything online. All those in favor? And any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, item 2 is the Sewage Commission minutes from November 7th. Moved for receipt by Hillian, second by Grant. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Water Committee minutes.
Water Committee minutes from November 7th, also moved by Grieve, and I heard Morin seconding that. Any discussion at all? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have item 4 of the agenda. Move receipt from Hillian, seconded by Grieve. Thank you. This is the 2023 Corporate Energy and Emissions Update. I'd like to hand this over to CIO Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm pleased to introduce Michael Zabarski, Manager of Transit and Facilities, who will be introducing this report with a PowerPoint and then support the discussion if there is any questions to follow. So Mike, over to you.
Thanks, James, through the chair to the board. Before I begin, I just wanted to introduce one of our new staff members here at CBRD, Mike Barnard. He's joining us as our Corporate Climate Response Coordinator, a really critical resource for the organization to move forward with the corporate energy and emissions plan. So we're happy to have him and to advance this work. I need a clicker. Oh, there we go. Maybe. Yep, that's the one. Okay. So yes, the corporate energy emissions plan, as you may remember, was adopted in January of this year. And it utilized a baseline year of 2019 for the greenhouse gas emissions, established some fairly aggressive targets, including a 50% reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050. These align with the targets that you'll see in a lot of the provincial, federal, and across the globe plans to reduce emissions, to limit warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. The corporate energy and emissions plan, which I call the SEEP a lot. The SEEP identifies a number of initiatives that will take us to those targets, especially the 2030 target. That's where our initiatives are focused at this point. Big emphasis on phasing out fossil fuels, as you'll see later on in some of the slides. That's kind of what we need to be aggressive about, is getting rid of natural gas, gasoline, and diesel. Another thing that the SEEP does is it kind of shifts us away from purchasing carbon offsets as a means of achieving carbon neutrality, which is what this board has done since 2012. And it refocuses us and our resources, including our funds, towards those emission reduction projects. So just a big emphasis on emissions reduction rather than carbon neutrality through carbon offsets. What we do every year is we update our greenhouse gas energy inventory. So we've done that now for the previous year, which is 2022. That's the most recent full year of energy data. And you can see here on the graph since our baseline year of 2019. The 2 years in between, a lot lower. As you can probably guess, that was our COVID years. So our rec centers, for example, were primarily closed during those years, and our emissions were obviously a lot less because of that. We bounced back up to essentially where we were before the pandemic, with 1,643 tons of carbon dioxide emissions in 2022. And I think it's important to note that at the same time, over those years, we've also added a number of services and facilities, including the Union Bay Improvement District, Graham Lake Improvement District. We built a new water treatment plant, a new fire hall up in Merville. We've acquired the visitor center. So, even though we're kind of the same level as we were in 2019, we've also added a bunch of service and facilities. So I think we're doing, quite well, considering. And the other important note here is that we really didn't expect big reductions in the first few years of the SEEP. These initial actions that we're undertaking are primarily around planning and analysis studies and policy work. And I'll get to some of that work in a bit. We don't really expect to see big reductions until the decarbonization of our rec facilities, which I'll speak to in a minute. So from the 2022 inventory, we've updated these charts here to show kind of where our emissions are coming from. The pie chart on the left is showing our total corporate emissions by source. So you can see that natural gas is the big source of emissions, followed by gasoline and then electricity, or gasoline, I should say diesel, and then electricity. But natural gas, definitely a focus for us. The chart in the middle shows the emissions by department, and you can see the rec facilities, or the recreation department, which is primarily those facilities, represents 60% of our total corporate emissions, followed by wastewater and then water. For the rec department on the far right, the chart there shows that the vast majority of their emissions are from natural gas use, and that's for heating the pools and heating the space in those facilities. So real big emphasis moving forward on getting rid of our natural gas at the facilities. Natural gas is a much more potent greenhouse gas than a lot of the other gases, such as carbon dioxide. This is a much more potent energy source is what I meant to say. So electricity, we're very blessed here in BC to have a very clean energy source from our BC hydro grid that does fluctuate from year to year. Years that we have an abundant supply from our hydro generation facilities, we have a lot of clean energy. Other years, maybe where we're importing electricity from other provinces or states, sometimes that is a dirtier source of electricity. But in the last couple of years, we've been really lucky with a very clean source. There we go. So some of the highlights of the work that we've been doing this year and moving forward, at the facilities and transportation level, we're really focused on our rec facilities and decarbonizing those. Some of you may have heard earlier from the Rec Commission about the decarbonization plan that's underway. We've hired a consultant. They're working hard to figure out what needs to be done at the aquatic center and the sports center to drive down that gas use and be more energy efficient. That work will be concluding in April and will be brought back to the Rec Commission and probably the board for a bit of an update on what the pathway to decarbonize those facilities might look like. That alone could take us very close to our 2030 target if we do a good job with those two rec facilities. We're also undertaking some energy audits at the water treatment plant, the Water Pollution Control Center, and a biosolids composting facility. So looking at where within those facilities we can reduce energy use, whether it's more efficient pumps or pulling gas out of the heating equipment. And of course, we continue to electrify the fleet since the amendment to our fleet policy to require zero emissions vehicle purchases. We do struggle here and there with some of the heavy duty vehicles. So some of our water and wastewater vehicles, they do not make a light duty or I guess a heavy duty equivalent in a zero emissions vehicle. So dump trucks, for example, 1 ton pickups, we still are not able to buy those in a zero emissions vehicle. But we'll continue to look. Some of the policy work that we've been doing last year, or I guess this year, we adopted the internal cost of carbon policy earlier on. So that procedure, that policy is in place. We've established the procedure for what we do with those funds. They've been accumulating in reserves now. We're recommending some projects, which I'll touch on in a minute, that would utilize those funds next year. We're going to begin work next year also on a green building policy, and this will really guide all of our new facilities and major infrastructure that we build to make sure that we're building things that are essentially net zero to begin with. And then our procurement policy and our purchasing policy. So working towards making sure that our products and services that we acquire are helping towards our corporate emissions. So yeah, using the internal cost of carbon reserve funding next year, we're proposing to do a couple of studies. One would look at district heat, district energy and waste heat recovery. So we've done kind of smaller scale study recently at the Aquatic Center using surplus heat from the hospital. We would be doing kind of a more community focused study looking at where our infrastructure could be used as a heat source for something, or where there's another source of energy or heat that our facilities could benefit from throughout the community. And looking at what kind of conditions we might need to put in place in the future to facilitate more district energy and heat recovery throughout the community. And also a carbon sequestration opportunities assessment. So looking at some of the natural assets in our community, such as the forests or the estuaries, which do play a fairly significant role in sequestering carbon dioxide emissions. So is there an opportunity to conserve more land, purchase land, restore estuaries in a way that increases the carbon sequestration, and then maybe in turn is a source of essentially a way to offset our corporate emissions or just benefit the community in general. So those works would happen next year with internal cost of carbon funding. And earlier this year, the board did request some information on our greenhouse gas emissions related to the public transit service here in the Comox Valley. So we have worked with the BC Transit to get these figures, and it's important to note that these emissions are currently included in the provincial emissions inventory. There is obviously a shared operational control of the public transit service. So the CVRD board is responsible for setting the service levels, whereas BC Transit, for example, is responsible for the fleet, the buses, and they have an ambitious goal of electrifying that entire fleet by 2040. So that would really essentially get rid of all the emissions from our public transit fleet. And you can see that it's just over about 1,000 tons a year for the past few years, going up a little bit last year with some of the improvements we've made over the years. Another important note is that by providing more public transit in the community, we hope to reduce community emissions by attracting more people out of their private automobile and in towards the bus. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions, and if I can't answer them, I'll be bugging Mike Barnard to come up.
Thank you, Mike, for that presentation, and welcome, Mike, to the CVRD team. It's great. Team Mike over there is taking care of all of your energy efficiency needs. Question I see from Director McCollum.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report and presentation. There's lots of good work highlighted here, and it's great to see this plan being implemented. I had a couple of questions. One is that it's highlighted in the report what our current balance is for the internal cost of carbon, and then what the expected is for the year going forward. But can you remind me what we are actually calculating a ton of carbon at? Because it was just the total was in the report, but not the breakdown of per ton. And I was just curious what that was.
Yeah, so the internal cost of carbon policy sets the carbon price at $160 per ton, net of the provincial carbon tax, and escalating at 6% per year.
Oh, great. Yeah, I was going to ask what our increases were on that. Thank you. The other question I had was around the heavy duty vehicles. Are there starting to be hybrid options, or is it pretty much just traditional combustion that's available, or is there some like in between options that are coming online?
Yeah, there's definitely some definitely hybrid and zero emissions vehicles starting to be kind of available. Like they're very early days. There's, maybe in the province it's electric, and you'll see these stories about a dump truck here, a large piece of equipment there. But it's been just very early days for those things, and so acquiring them is going to be difficult at this point, not to mention expensive. So we're kind of waiting to see over the next few years how those markets evolve, and hopefully be in a position to start buying those heavy duty vehicles in a few years.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that context. And then the final question I had was just around the local government climate action program and how that funding fits into this work. Are we implementing that with the plan, or I'm not sure how that works at the regional district level, but I'm wondering if you can kind of add some information around that funding as well.
Yeah, definitely. The local government climate action program is another funding source based on population that the regional district gets. And I believe it's just the population of the electoral areas. And so at this point, we're looking at that funding source as a way to fund some of the community programs that we might want to launch, especially focusing on the rural areas. And we're kind of looking at the internal cost of carbon as a way to fund some of the corporate stuff.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And online we have Chair Cole Hamilton.
Now unmuted. Thanks so much for this report, Mike. I just wanted to make maybe an observation on the green building requirements that we're going to be developing over 2024. It talks about continuing a requirement to construct at LEED Gold, which is an admirable thing to be doing, and talks about the possibility of excluding natural gas. And I guess the reading, I don't know if you agree, the reading I've done so far seems to indicate that eliminating natural gas is sort of the least expensive and the most effective way of reducing emissions from a building. I think it's that on the energy step code, a step 5 building using natural gas, which is net zero ready, emits 4 times as much as a step 1 building using all electric for heating and hot water. So I hope that will receive kind of a focus when we're developing those green building requirements. And I also just had a question. It was about slide 3. If you could, it was about the ratio of electric to natural gas that we were seeing, and it seems to me that just it's the bars for the different years, which are broken down. I think it's the previous slide maybe, but it seemed to indicate that I could see that we might have an increase in natural gas between 2019 and 2022 due to taking on new facilities, but we seem to have an actual decrease in the use of electricity in absolute terms. I was just wondering what that would be.
Yeah, so that orange slice in 2022 there, that's the electricity component, and you're right that it's a lot less than especially 2019 and 2020. And this is what I was speaking to earlier about the intensity of the hydro grid. So that fluctuates from year to year. 2019, 2020, the BC hydro grid was a little bit dirtier than it was in the last couple of years because of the supply and our net imports and exports. So we're really benefiting quite well this last couple of years from a very clean grid. So as much as I want to pat ourselves on the back for doing a great job, we're also benefiting from the BC hydro grid being quite good and the stream flows being very healthy over the last couple of years. Moving into next year's inventory, we're suspecting maybe not as great of an emissions intensity from hydro with the droughts that we had this year and the stream flows maybe being a little bit less than previous years. So yeah, gas went up. Electricity, I don't know if it went up as far as actual use, but it definitely went down from an emissions intensity perspective.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate the clarification there. I had one more question, but I'll just cede the floor as I see there are others who have their lights on. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thanks, Chair. We'll come back to you in a moment. Over to Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. Two questions, Mike. First of all, there was a reference in an earlier report at the Rec Commission today that if that project of a turf field moves ahead and washrooms are constructed, that they'd be along the model of some of the provincial parks and other facilities. And what I've noted over the years is that we're seeing solar panels on those facilities at rest stops and that type of thing. Is that part of what we're envisioning? And if we are, will that make a substantial difference?
Yeah, so the importance of that green building policy is really evident here. I don't know the details of the artificial turf field project, but our hope is that we would work with our rec staff and make sure that whatever's being designed, whether it's washroom facilities or otherwise, they would obviously be as energy efficient as possible and hopefully also include renewable energy sources like solar, to make sure that they're not really impacting our corporate emissions too much. But on that note, as we move forward and we do look at building new facilities and infrastructure, this is something we always need to kind of keep in mind, that any of these things we add into our portfolio has the potential to increase our corporate emissions footprint.
Well, that was actually my second question, because you seem pretty optimistic in this report that we can and will meet our targets, which was really good to hear. But I wanted to know if that also takes into consideration the potential for new buildings that we may have in the next few years.
Yeah, within reason. We don't necessarily have all the design details, for some of these future buildings, but our hope is to use electricity as being a clean source versus natural gas wherever possible, which I think is definitely fairly feasible for any of those facilities, except for maybe the rec. If we build new, pools, for example, they may have heating requirements that exceed the electrical abilities of heating equipment. But those are things we need to flush out through the design processes for those facilities. So I'm optimistic at this point that we can do it. The technology's advancing and getting better all the time, and we're blessed to have that clean electricity in BC. So as long as we kind of stay the course on phasing out natural gas and fossil fuels and really focusing on electrification, I think we're in good shape.
I will just add a follow-up. I wonder if you could reassure us how your department, which is responsible for these controlling our emissions, how you intersect with our other departments to make sure that any new projects are in fact going to be responsible as far as our carbon footprint.
Yeah, so we work directly with each department, especially REC right now. We're very involved with a number of projects that they have on the go. Mike Barnard, now joining the team, is able to be involved in the design processes for upgrades and new facilities, and as well water and wastewater. We're starting to get more involved with them on some of their projects. And then every year we meet with each department a couple of times to review their emissions, what their projects are for next year, how they're doing according to the targets we've established. So it's really just working closely with them, helping build capacity within those other departments and build that culture corporately for looking for these opportunities to reduce emissions.
I see a question from Director Grieve, and then we'll go back to Chair Cole Hamilton.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Well, Mike, I'm glad you're optimistic because, if you actually look at the state of the world right now, you can be quite, you can be beset with dysphoria because I read recently where over the last 20 years, China itself has produced enough concrete to pave the entire country of England from coast to coast and turn it into a parking lot. Until recently, they were opening somewhere in the world a coal-fired power plant on an average of one a week. And we look at the American political scene down south, and we're going to be waving that little Canadian flag in a cloud of pollution from other countries. So I think sometimes with great expectations comes potential great disappointment. So it's we're doing this because we know it's the right thing to do, and we know it's what our constituents want us to do. But in real terms, where's the end game? What do you see as the ultimate outcome of this? Being good Canadians, we're doing the right thing again. But I see the world actually moving in the other direction quite rapidly. So just if you want to comment, not to bring you down.
Yeah, no, it's a scary world out there for sure. And, we're talking today about our corporate emissions and trying to do as much as we can corporately with the things that we have a lot of control over. Others in our organization are working very hard on the community emissions. We've got the community greenhouse gas emissions inventory now done. We've got a regional, community climate action plan or strategy coming up next year. And the emissions out of the community, far outweigh our corporate emissions. And then you bring it up to the national and global levels. Yeah, there's a lot of greenhouse gas emissions out there, and some of the reports we've been seeing from the UN and the IPCC around the trends, it's not great, and we're needing to do as much as we possibly can, as quickly as we possibly can, to reverse that trend. So I'm optimistic on the corporate side. I'm hopeful on the community side, and a little bit scared about the global stuff.
That's great. That's the optimism we need. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. To temper that. And sorry, Chair, I see Director Arbour had his hand up and as a first-time speaker, so I'll go to him first. Director Arbour.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see the report. I'm a little bit like the mosquito in the tent in that I'm not always, I've yet to be fully satisfied with the report. I think something I really like that you did is we had requested to add transit, and you did, and for me that's very much. I think we still think differently as the direct corporate versus the things that we control or involved in. And for me, I prefer for us to look at the full picture. The one element that's missing in this report is the landfill and the methane emissions. I think why that matters is it's easy for us to receive. We're receiving information right now. We're not being asked to make decisions on capital investments that will cost money for retrofits or other systems. And those days will come soon, which is where the mettle of the board will really be tested. And I think I would like to next time to have the comprehensive list, including the methane and landfill, because as a corporation, we will have to make decisions. It's a bit like Dr. Cole Hamilton talked about on the community side. We'll have to make some decisions as to where we can get the best return on investment, because I don't think that this board, faced with all the cost pressures we have, will be able to do it all. So I would love for the future report to truly be comprehensive, to also include a chart that shows over time how those sources of emissions can reduce and by how much. So I think the information is still hard to absorb currently. So that's my comment. Otherwise, obviously, very happy with the overall work and that we're heading into that direction. Thank you.
I would just ask our CEO to comment on that, as it is a different board that deals with those facilities, but please comment, CEO Warren.
Thank you. Yeah, and you're right. The Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board is the entity responsible for the Waste Management Center and the landfill and the emissions. And so that board has also been undertaking some work with respect to corporate emissions and understanding its own inventory and its own opportunities for improvement. And you're right, Director Arbor, those would be decisions to be made by that board. I can appreciate having that full picture is important for any board to be able to understand what change it might be able to make and what degree of impact it can affect or see happen when they take action. So we can look to see how best we can illustrate that more broad picture as we bring this information back, but bearing in mind that yes, it's a different board that's making those decisions. Going forward.
If I may, it's a different board, but it is not a different corporation. It still falls under the corporation of the Comox Valley Regional District, and this is our corporate emissions plan. So that's been my point all along. Thank you.
Yeah, fair point. The CVRD does have responsibility for Comox Strathcona Waste Management. The board membership expands when decisions are being made on that CSWM topic area. But you're right, it's all under that one corporation. It's a bit of a complicated beast in that sense.
Thank you.
Great. And I know our chair, Cole Hamilton, met with the All-Party Parliamentary Climate Caucus yesterday, so might have some further insights into this issue. Go ahead.
Well, certainly there were, thanks, Vice Chair. Yeah, there was certainly an interest there in the work that we were doing, and and just emission reductions on all sides were. But my question specifically was, I just wanted to know a bit more about the sequestration possibilities that were referred to in the report. Those seem to be regional, and I know there's going to be a report forthcoming. I'm just curious, Michael, if you could just tell us a little bit about where those are or what they're about.
Yeah, so the SEEP kind of touches on carbon sequestration and carbon neutralizations as something we might look at, well off in the future as part of our net zero target. So net zero meaning a 90% reduction, but recognizing that we can't really get it down to absolute zero. So that last 10% is something where the SEEP talks about possibly carbon sequestration projects as a way to, sink the carbon away and lock it away. And recognizing that that's, yes, far away, 2050 is where we're aiming for for net zero. But meanwhile, we are emitting greenhouse gas emissions every year, and we're obviously trying to reduce our corporate emissions, but we are interested in starting to investigate local carbon sequestration opportunities that might be available to us before that 2050, net zero target. So we would be looking at, primarily forest carbon capture. We're aware that blue carbon and kind of the estuary does play a significant role in sequestering carbon, and there could be others. So the point of this study would be to really, hire some experts in this matter, have them help us look at our local resources, our local natural assets as they relate to carbon sequestration, and then, what role we might play. Is there an opportunity for the board to acquire, forest land or other lands, possibly through the regional parks service that's been established recently? Is there a way for us to invest in other community groups that might be working to similar goals, like the Cumberland Forest Society, and just get a better understanding of how much land do we need to acquire or protect or restore? Is it 1 hectare? Is it 100 hectares? What kind of land is it? How much is it? Not all forest is created equally. So where are we best to focus our efforts? So that's kind of the nature of that study. And then, something that we could consider possibly moving forward on sooner than 2050 as a way to possibly offset our interim emissions, but also create community benefits.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Mike. And it seems like that's sort of a win-win if we can be protecting some of the natural assets here in the valley, possibly even land around our watershed, and at the same time be sort of contributing to sequestration. It means the internal cost of carbon funds could be put to use locally for sort of multiple benefits. thanks. That was a really great clarification.
Director Hilliard?
Thanks, Chair. Just two quick ones. First of all, I'm wondering if staff can indicate whether we'll be carrying on with something along the lines of the 52 weeks program, which has been highlighting what the RD is doing in relation to climate and community. And along those lines, if we have any plans to provide information stations in our buildings that show what we're doing, because I can think of nothing better than when young people come to play sports, that they actually see what their community elders are doing to try and make a difference in relation to climate action now with greener buildings. And that would I think help them to have hope and be resolved to carry on with that work.
Yeah, so, or did you want to?
I can jump in on the 52 weeks campaign first, and then Mike, you can take over on the info panels and that. But yeah, the 52 weeks campaign was an effort to, on a weekly basis, report out on some of the different activities the board's been supporting and staff have been delivering in terms of, activities that have been reducing greenhouse gas emissions, trying to live up to our pledge around the climate crisis. And so over the past, I think we've been, it started in February or March. I believe we've had that many weeks worth of social media posts. Some get some traction, others don't. So we're always assessing what's the best way to get our message out and share this information to the community. I don't know that we've decided on whether we'll carry forward on the 52 weeks exactly, but there's always opportunity to get messaging in the community. And so, that is one method. And I think we're always open to other suggestions.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that we are planning to do a communications plan next year to look at how to report out on our corporate emissions in conjunction with the community climate strategy that's going to be undertaken next year. So there'll be a lot of community focused engagement and outreach about both corporate and community. And I agree. I think our facilities are excellent opportunities to educate people. In this building, for example, we have a kind of a permanent display, or I guess a poster up in the hallway. We also have the TV that's projecting slides about some of the green building features in this building here. And I think as we start to undertake some of these retrofits that are at our rec facilities, that would be another excellent opportunity to showcase what we're doing in those facilities and engage with the public on some of the features of the buildings that are helping to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, just looking online, I don't see any other questions. Anyone in the room? No. So Mike, thanks for that report. I guess we'll vote on receipt. All those in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. All right, so moving along to bylaws and resolutions. We have a recommendation for bylaws 792 with regards to.
Move that.
Yeah, thank you, Director Grant. Yes, and this is a vote for the areas. Any discussion about this? Okay, we have two members of the areas online. So all those in favor? Any opposed? Just a chance for anyone online who's opposed to chime in. Perfect, motion carries. And second recommendation for bylaw number 811. This is the Comox Valley Water Supply System bulk water rates. And motion by Grieve, seconded by Grant. Thanks for your efficiency. And this is a vote for areas A, B, C, Courtney, and Comox. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Perfect. Move third reading. Again, vote of the areas Comox and Courtney. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? All right. And we don't have any new business. So maybe a motion to go into camera.
Second.
Okay. And all those in favor? Go in camera. Thank you very much, everyone.